Hey everyone, today I want to share 5 super easy tips to make your stop motion animations a bit better that I discovered along the way that I hope will help you out. Number 1 is pretty obvious. It is to stabilize your camera, preferably if you have a tripod like I have here. You can get a full-size tripod or you can get something small that fits on a tabletop like this little guy that I got at Walmart for something like 15 bucks a few years ago. It works great. It's a great solution for stop motion animations, especially if you have a small camera that this thing can support. Even if you don't have a tripod, stabilize your camera by putting a stack of notebooks together, a stack of blocks or something, anything other than handheld, because that obviously is not going to be stable for a stop motion animation. The camera is going to be moving all over the place. Tip number 2 is to use a remote to take pictures or a timer on the camera. The point of a remote is so that when you take a picture, the picture isn't being taken while your finger is pressing the button. Instead, you press the button and then a picture is taken 2 seconds later. That's a timer. Or using a remote, you can plug the remote into the camera and then press a button on the remote to take the picture. Either way, there's an advantage because when your finger presses the button, it can actually push down the camera and move it around a little bit, even if you have it mounted on a tripod. But by turning on a 2-second timer, I can push the button and then release it, and then the camera takes a picture. That way, you don't have the movement of your finger on the camera disrupting the shots. It just makes the camera that much more stable. So definitely look out for a 2-second timer function on the camera if you're picking a camera. This one has one, but even the smaller, cheap point and shoot camera I started out with, the Canon PowerShot A470, had one as well. Or be on the lookout for a remote that you can purchase because that would help a lot. Speaking of camera capabilities, tip number 3 is to always shoot in manual when possible. The point of shooting in manual is so that you can control the exposure, the white balance, and everything like that, and it will be consistent with every picture you take in the shot. If you're shooting in automatic, you don't have that control, and the camera might be automatically switching white balance between pictures. It might be automatically adjusting for exposure, and that can result in a bit of a flashy, flickery shot. It looks inconsistent, and it totally breaks the illusion of motion, in my opinion, when the white balance is changing all over the place or the light is flickering. I've had it in a few of my videos. If you look, there have been times when I've forgotten to switch from automatic white balance, and it definitely shows. So if you can, be sure to shoot everything in manual because you want total control over every setting so that it's consistent across every shot. And so speaking of consistent lighting, tip number 4 is to control your lighting as much as possible. So you want to control the camera settings by shooting in manual, but you also definitely want to control the lighting in your room. So if you notice, I only shoot my stop motions at night because this window here can be really bright, and as the clouds move back and forth across the sun or the trees move, it just casts these really weird shadows all over my table, and it just totally ruins the consistency of lighting. And of course the sun is way brighter than any of the lights in here, so it's really hard to control for that. Unless of course I put some curtains that completely blocked out the light, but I don't have that, so I shoot at night. And so tip number 4 is really similar to tip number 3, but lighting, in my opinion, is a huge reason why a stop motion can look sort of amateurish. If the screen is flashing, it just totally can ruin the illusion of motion, and it looks like a bunch of pictures stitched together rather than a video. And that's ultimately what you want your stop motion animation to look like, is if you just recorded a video of a character moving, right? So tip number 5 would be to actually stabilize the figure that you're animating. I can't tell you how many times I've been working on a shot and I accidentally bump into the figure as I move my hand away from animating it, or I bump into the table and it just falls over, ruining like 20 minutes of work, and I have to start the shot all over again. These days, I just use some cheap double-sided tape here, and I put it at the bottom of the figure's feet so that I can pose them much more easily, and I don't have to worry about slightly bumping into them and them falling completely over. As you can see, the right kind of double-sided tape can be a really strong stabilization source for the figure. This guy is not going anywhere and is only really limited by his own posability. So double-sided tape is a very easy and frugal way to stabilize a figure and make sure that you don't ruin your own shot by bumping into the table. Of course, if you're willing to spend a bit more money, you can get more advanced in double-sided tape and get some stop motion armatures to hold up the figure, but double-sided tape works just fine for most of my purposes. So those are 5 simple tips that I wanted to share that I use when shooting my stop motion animations to make it easier to shoot them and to make the final product look a lot better. If you want to learn more about the techniques I do in the post-production process of stop motion animation, I have a whole series of After Effects tutorials on my channel where I talk about how to add things like motion blur, fake camera motion, retiming the animation, and things like that. So be sure to subscribe to my channel if you want more stop motion tips and tutorials. Let me know what your tips and tutorials are and how you've improved your animation process, and thanks for watching.